Marjorie the Monster Taylor Greene reminded us just how disgusting she is during a committee hearing on the COVID-19 school closures when she had this interaction with Randi Weingarten, a respected former lawyer, educator, and the president of the American Federation of Teachers.
I now recognize Ms. Greene from Georgia for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Weingarten, are you a medical doctor?
I am not.
Are you a mother?
I am a mother by marriage.
By marriage, I see.
And my wife is here with me, so I'm really glad that she's here, Rabbi Sharon Klein.
Ms. Weingarten, and you haven't taught school since the 90s, so you're not a teacher anymore.
I am actually, Representative, I'm actually on leave from my teaching position, and this fall I will be teaching as a guest teacher at Cornell, my alma mater.
When was the last year you taught? 1997, is that correct?
The last time I taught a full class was June 1997.
Okay, that's been quite a long time, approximately 26 years ago. Do you believe in the First Amendment, Ms. Weingarten?
I believe in the Constitution, including the First Amendment, of course.
Oh, great. Well, I'd like to remind you of one of your tweets here where you agreed that my suspension on Twitter, in your own words, politicians shouldn't be exempt from standards about spreading misinformation. Greene has repeatedly shown reckless disregard for those standards. This suspension is justified. This is your tweet. Just last year, January 2nd, 2022, I was suspended for my statements about COVID-19 as a member of Congress, by the way. And also, I'd like to point out by the emojis by your name here, it looks like you're more of a political activist than anything. Clearly, unfortunately, you think Ukraine comes before the United States. I'm not sure what the black flex is. I mean, is that digital blackface? But congratulations on graduating from school. But I'd like to
No, it is about honoring black
Ms.
educators.
Weingarten, I reclaim my time. I didn't ask you a question.
Sorry.
What I'd like to talk about is your recommendations to the CDC as not a medical doctor, not a biological mother, and really not a teacher either. So what you did is you advised the CDC.
Mr. Chairman, that's a
Excuse me, this is my time. You advised the CDC to have schools provide remote work, options for staff that have documented high-risk conditions who are increased risk for severe illness from COVID-19 to limit the risk of workplace exposure, telework, virtual teaching opportunities, modified job responsibilities, environmental modifications, scheduling flexibility, temporary reassignments to different job responsibilities. None of your advice had to do with to stop the spread of COVID-19. It was all about teachers staying home. And there was big results of that. Let me tell you, I am a mother, and all 3 of my children were directly affected by the school closures, by your recommendations, which is something that you really can't understand. I'd like to point out, let's talk about the real effects of this. Obviously, we know the test results. Oh, and by the way, you celebrating what I had said on Twitter, I had said that children should be in school. I had said the truth, that children were not dying at high rates of COVID-19 like older people were. I had also advocated for our children, not for teachers getting to stay home and kids being forced into virtual schooling. I advocated for the safety of our children and for their education. But you, as a political activist, for the president of the teachers union, we're not advocating for anything good for our kids, and our kids have suffered greatly. As a matter of fact, suicides increased. Their rates of learning went down. And you know what else happened to them? Anxiety, depression, all kinds of problems happened to kids. And then ironically, here's something that was shocking to me, and I'll bring this up to you. You know what else happened? While kids were forced to stay home, and you approve of this, the diagnosis of youths with gender dysphoria surged. This is literally 2020, but yet this is 2021. And this is a problem. This is a major problem. And the direct effect of school closures can be seen here. These are diagnoses of gender dysphoria. And you can see it sharply increased after 20 and 21. It went up. The rates went up. So kids were forced to stay home into so-called virtual learning, where they were spending a lot of time on social media, and all of a sudden we see a direct result of this. And this is a major problem. But the other problem is you had no business advising the CDC what the medical guidelines were for school closures, because now we have a nation of school children who have suffered because of it. The problem is people like you need to admit that you're just a political activist, not a
Gentlelady's
teacher,
time is-
not a mother, and not a medical doctor.
Gentlelady's time is
I yield.
expired.
Yeah.
I now recognize Mr. Jordan from Ohio for 5 minutes.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make note that the decorum of the attacks on the witness were unacceptable that the gentlelady from Georgia just did. And so it'd be nice if we didn't attack the witnesses, particularly and making a decision about whether or not she's a mother. You are a mother. Thank you for being a great parent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Your point of order is recognized, Mr. Garcia.
A point of
Now
order.
recognize Mr.
Point of order. Given that his point of order is recognized, and given that that was not just cruel personal attacks to Ms. Weingarten, who loves her children, it is reflective of the cruel personal attacks to any adopted mother or father who love their children. So I would kindly ask that those remarks be taken out of the record, for the sake of all of the parents who have adopted a child and love them dearly and see them as their own.
Now, because of the way those committees are structured, the witnesses don't really have much power to interrupt representatives who are acting in such a pitiful way. But Weingartner did have a chance to respond to Marjorie Taylor Greene during a recent interview on MSNBC.
But it's just a matter of the undermining of people, the undermining of trans kids, the undermining of the other. And so I felt like I was taking one for the team, but the vile homophobic nature of it was pathetic. And the undermining of families was pathetic.
I completely agree with Weingartner there. Marjorie Taylor Greene is completely pathetic. Now, I would go a step further and say that she's not undermining families. She's not undermining LGBTQ parents. She's dehumanizing them, right? And that is one of the ways that these fascists love to try to get power, is try to dehumanize the other side. And it's really nice to see Weingartner not fall into Marjorie Taylor Greene's trap and overreact, but simply just stay above the fray, right? When MTG goes low, we go high, and to just call it for what it is, right? It's pathetic, which perfectly sums up Marjorie Taylor Greene these days. And it seems as though nearly every time she appears during a hearing, she's going to remind the world just how terrible of a person she is. Now, I don't know if that's going to continue to work for her in Georgia. She's from one of the reddest parts of Georgia, but man, if I'm in her district, I am completely embarrassed by this person.